I'm Mark Reed-Edwards, Chief Marketing Officer at HFS. Welcome to this HFS videocast of a discussion between Saurabh Gupta, HFS President of Research and Advisory Services, and Dan Burnett, Executive Director of the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance. So let's hand things over to Saurabh to get things underway. Saurabh, take it away.
Hey, thanks, Mark, and welcome, Dan. Look, I think we've been researching the enterprise blockchain space, Dan, for the last 5 years or so. And what we are seeing now is a big surge in use of public blockchains for enterprise use cases. In fact, we just completed a research where Ethereum came across as the #1 blockchain platform of choice for enterprise use cases. So I thought, who better to sort of ask some tough questions than get you here. So why don't you start by telling us a little bit about yourself, Dan, and what is this Ethereum Enterprise Alliance? What's your mission? What does success mean to you guys?
Sure. Boy, let's say I'll just say a little bit about myself very briefly. I have a technical background, so I have a doctorate in computer science, and this is using neural networks for speech recognition, which basically means machine learning before it was really called machine learning broadly. So that's where I began, but I shifted pretty quickly to doing web and internet standards. And so for more than 20 years, I've spent my time building more than a dozen standards for the web and the internet, including a couple that you may or may not have heard of recently: Webrtc, which underlies a lot of the peer-to-peer video calling that we do, and verifiable credentials and decentralized identifiers, which are being used increasingly for digital identity and self-sovereign identity. The EEA, the EEA was founded in 2017, and originally it was started to provide support for what was called Enterprise Ethereum at the time. And what that meant was the private networks, not the use of the public Ethereum network. So same technologies, but consortium networks where a group of banks or some other group would get together and run their own network. Obviously, you don't get the massive decentralization benefits from doing that, but it was the reason that was happening at the time and was needed at the time was because Ethereum was new. People weren't sure they could trust it. And so that was where we began. We began doing standards there. We've definitely migrated. In fact, we started adding mainnet focused work, I would say, I think probably 2019, maybe. So we were already beginning to incorporate support for standards or other discussions around mainnet Ethereum and use of public mainnet Ethereum at that time. Now, I joined in 2020, and my goal since then has been to help the EEA continue to grow to support businesses. And I think we've actually shifted even within the past 6 months to where we're now talking about ourselves as supporting professional and commercial development. And I think that's really how we see ourselves going forward at this point, is that there's this, the Ethereum community and blockchain in general is a little bit of a hobbyist culture still. And that's the best term I have for it. And I've been through a number of those in my life and career. And we're trying to get beyond the hobbyist only, right? It's great. Hobbyists innovate and they move quickly and so on, but it doesn't really become mainstream until you get out to where every business on the planet uses it. So that is what we're focused on. You'll often hear people within the blockchain space, and particularly within the Ethereum space, talking about onboarding the next billion developers. But we're interested in onboarding the next billion users, because it is when it makes its way out into the world and all of my relatives who are non-technical at all are using it on an everyday basis, then we'll know that it's really mainstream. And that's what we're about. Increasingly, we're focusing on reaching outside of what I would call the crypto bubble.
Yeah, and I think that's why EEA is so special for us at HFS, because our mission, Dan, is also to educate enterprises on not just what the technology is, but on how they can actually use to create some value, right? And I think we focus a lot on the features and functionality versus educating enterprises and clients on what can they do with the technology, what business problems can they solve. And
Right.
talking about that, there's, in this hobbyist world, there's just so many terms floating around, right? We started with crypto, we still in that crypto bubble. It bursts sometimes and then it again builds up. We obviously talked about blockchain and smart contracts, private versus public. Now there's this whole new world of NFTs and CBDCs and Web3 is now coming into picture. Simplify that for us, right? A little bit. How does all this fit together? Where does Ethereum Enterprise Alliance play into this? How should a average business owner look at all these things?
Right. I think there's a one of the things that we've noticed when we look out at the material that's publicly available for explaining the technology. One of the things we often see is that the material is either too high level or too deeply technical. And this is a real problem for many business people. You can get this sense that you know what it's about without actually being able to use it or do anything with it yet. So I always like to start, with an explanation, a brief explanation that, everyone's heard of Bitcoin. Okay, everyone has heard of Bitcoin, right? So Bitcoin was the beginning of sort of this trend. And I'm not talking about like when first research happened or any of that, but I'm talking about when this really, became a thing. It was Bitcoin that started it. And the real innovation there, of course, was the consensus algorithm. The whole idea is that whether you're dealing with money or a variety of other transactions, any transaction really, between two parties who don't know each other, there always needs to be a third party in the middle. Okay, there's this, and usually it's a human or it's an organization. There's someone who's that middleman between those two parties. And so what the innovation with Bitcoin was to realize that you can actually take a group of computers and have the group of computers all operate in their self-interest, competing to write transactions onto a ledger that they all share and can all view. And that was the real innovation. So instead of, like right now, if I call my bank, if I look at my bank statement and my bank says I have a certain amount of money and I think I have a different amount of money, the bank is the one who says how much money I have, right? Right. They are the ultimate arbiters of what transaction actually occurred. And there could be any number of issues with that, from fraud to hack, unintentional, hacking or other kinds of things that would get in the way of that transaction being correct. Okay, so now what we have instead is a collection of computers who all compete to be the ones to post that transaction, and none of those computers know which one is going to get to do it. So in other words, it's fairly safe to do it this way. But now what you have is there's no one party who gets to decide what's the actual real transaction that got posted. What you have is this collection of computers that do it, and we can all trust it. That's the point, is that it's created in a way that you can trust the result without requiring a human or an organization in the middle to make that happen. Now, the use of this technology to create a digital currency or a cryptocurrency is only one use. And Vitalik Buterin is credited with, realizing, hey, that's just a computer program that's making that part happen. We can use this consensus algorithm to do any kind of transaction. In fact, allow a computer program that can do any computation you can think of, any business logic you can think of. So not just, do I have enough money to do this transaction? Like, do I have enough Bitcoins and then transferring Bitcoins? No, you can do a lot more than that. And that's what smart contracts are on Ethereum. So Bitcoin is an application. Ethereum is a platform. Ethereum has the Ethereum virtual machine on which these smart contracts operate and allow you to build all kinds of solutions. And so everything that we hear, from NFTs to other cryptocurrencies to everything else, is all built on Ethereum or other comparable chains. And Ethereum was the first, and is the longest running and most stable of those chains. So I had to get that in there. I'm going to mention it a few times. I think that's why we're seeing the success that we are.
No, I think that's fair. Even our data suggests that Ethereum has emerged from an enterprise perspective. At least that's what we focus on. Dan has emerged as the number one platform of choice for creating enterprise use cases on blockchain. But the one question that I still have is, are we still in the hype phase? Are we beyond the hype phase? Where do you think we are with respect to enterprise blockchain, right? There's still a lot of naysayers, right, within enterprises. Let's be honest about that, right? And where do you think we are from an adoption perspective?
Yeah, there absolutely are. I mean, even though what you and I are talking about is enterprise deployments, enterprise use, we're not talking, this is important, we're not talking about cryptocurrencies, we're not talking about NFT speculation or anything like that. Okay? We're talking about the sort of regular everyday use of this technology for business purposes. And what we know that more people are aware of it. That doesn't mean they understand it, as I talked about already. And unfortunately, popular sound bites, news sound bites, are still all about the dangers of those other things. Okay, so interest in even business use is impacted by popular cycles of boom and bust in cryptocurrency prices. But for the most part, deployments continue. The Ethereum network continues to run, and businesses are continuing to steadily deploy on it. But it's really important. There are naysayers. I think largely the naysayers are out there because they haven't gotten the right information. They've been hearing horror stories. They've been hearing about problems instead of hearing about what continues to work. Right. So I said it glibly just now that the Ethereum network continues to run. There may be applications that fail. Okay, and then there may be news stories about particular applications that fail. But the core underlying network of Ethereum continues to run. Now, if you look at private networks, so private consortium networks versus use of the public mainnet, we are seeing that transition ourselves as well, more away from using your own private network to using public ones. And I think a lot of the fear was around the use of a public network. And what we're seeing now is less fear as we educate people about the public network. We've been putting out a series of primers and also our Ethereum business readiness report. And that in particular was released to begin to address these concerns by showing not use cases, but case studies. There's an important distinction here. I always say use cases are for sellers, case studies are for buyers, right? Use cases are what you could do. Case studies are what you actually did, and you can demonstrate really works today. So that was our goal, was to identify case studies, real deployments, and to talk about the implications of that on, for business owners who might be considering this, to give them real information, as well as a real framework for understanding how to think about, which way they want to go. Do they want to do a private network? Do they want to operate on public network? What are the trade-offs there?
Yep. No, I think we have seen an uptick in adoption of public blockchains like Ethereum. Is this attributed solely to education, or do you think there have been technological advancements like zero knowledge proofs comes to mind immediately, but there could be others? Talk to us a little bit. How have public blockchains become safer and more effective for businesses to use to run their transactions?
Absolutely. In fact, when we started, we used to talk about the reason for having a private chain was the 3 Ps: privacy, permissioning, and performance. Okay, those were the 3 things that you couldn't guarantee to get on the public blockchain, but that businesses needed. They needed to know that their transactions would be private. They needed to know that they could control. The permissioning aspect was important. Who can participate in adding transactions and who can't? And as you look at conversations in the world today, there are big discussions about when someone should be permitted to operate within a particular network or not. and businesses need that. And then of course there's performance, right? And there's the need to scale up arbitrarily as you increase the number of transactions. And what we've been seeing is in ways in which those are being addressed now in the public network. So from the privacy perspective, the zero knowledge proofs are doing that, okay? So zero knowledge proofs are essentially a way to record that you know a piece of information unequivocally, but to do it without giving any information, anything, any tips, any hints about that information. So you can always prove to someone later that, yep, that is the information, but you don't have to reveal the info to do it. It's like a password that you never have to reveal. And so that's a new technology that is improving opportunities for privacy. On the permissioning front, what we're seeing at both permissioning and performance, what we're seeing is layer 2s and side chains. And the difference, I would say, is that a side chain is another network that does some operations. You do transactions there, and then maybe it actually records a state on the main Ethereum public chain, for example. But that's the only relationship. A layer 2 is designed to build directly on top of Ethereum in such a way that that you inherit all of the decentralization and security properties of the main layer 1 network. Now, in order to do that, you essentially, what you have to do is ensure that any disagreements, any disputes on the layer 2 get resolved on layer 1. And that's all that's needed. So what the layer 2s are providing is greater scalability, as in greater performance. And they do that by being able to batch transactions, essentially, right? You can run a whole large number of transactions on this other network and then sum them up, you roll them up, and that's what you essentially record onto the Ethereum mainnet. You also, as far as, as far as permissioning, you can do that via layer 2 or a sidechain. Again, you're running on another network and where you have requirements for who can participate, but you're always making sure that you're tied back to the original network in terms of this, do I trust that the computers are acting as that independent third party instead of a human or an organization of some sort. So really what's changed is those things. Those technological changes have allowed for that move. And I think it's great because you don't have to do your own infrastructure, right? So if you were considering using a private or consortium chain, you need to run, you or the folks in your network need to run all of the nodes in that network. That may not be the case if you're going to an application running on public Ethereum. You actually don't have to run a node at all if you're doing an application there. If you have a layer 2, maybe you're participating in one of those nodes of the network, but you've done it in such a way that your security is provided by that original core network. So you're not responsible for the security of that network, at least from a blockchain perspective.
Yeah, no, that's super helpful. And the other concern that I always, not always, but often hear is around the environmental impact of using blockchain and the carbon footprint, etc. Now, on one hand, we see blockchain to be extensively being used for carbon accounting and helping
Yes.
helping enterprises meet some of the reporting compliance issues. But on the other hand, you always have conversations around the carbon footprint itself of things like Ethereum or Bitcoin, or what are you doing to address some of that?
Right. So interestingly, all we're trying to do right now, the EA, is education, because the Ethereum network, the developers who advance the core of Ethereum are planning the merge. As I'm sure everyone's heard about
Yes.
it, or many people have heard about it. It's coming. Nobody ever knows the exact date. I think the current prediction is sometime in September. But it's really looking like it's going to happen. It's going to happen fairly soon. And so the idea with the merge is that we're transitioning, the Ethereum public mainnet Ethereum is transitioning from proof of work to proof of stake. And so those are two different consensus algorithms. And just
Yep.
like I mentioned at the beginning, the idea with your consensus network is that you don't know which computer is going to get to record a transaction. That's important to make sure there's no ability to cheat. The way that was done with proof of work is essentially it's equivalent to like rolling dice. It's like you just make every computer roll dice. You know, here you have 6 dice and I need 6 ones to come up. And you just keep rolling until you get those 6 ones. Okay, and the first one to do it gets to go. That's essentially the way it worked. There's a lot of wasted computation that's happened in that. Both Bitcoin and the original Ethereum network operate that way. But the change to proof of stake now uses a different randomness approach that is now, there's been a lot more research, a lot more analysis to understand how to do that randomness in a way that doesn't require this long, expensive process. And to do it in such a way that people essentially put up a stake, node operators put up a stake, and if they cheat, they lose a portion up to all of their stake. So, you know, it's not worthwhile for them financially to cheat. Now, proof of stake networks have been created between the time Ethereum was created and the merge, you know, in terms of other networks. But the reason it hasn't happened yet for Ethereum is because, number one, Ethereum is continuing to run. Okay, it's been this change is often compared to, you know, changing out the parts, changing out the engine of an airplane in flight, right? You're changing out parts while it has to keep flying. That's tricky to do. But the other reason is that the Ethereum community really took its time to make sure that this will work and is safe to do. And so the nice thing about this is we're going to see, I think some of the reports from the Ethereum Foundation are predicting a greater than 99%, some people say 99.9% reduction in energy use as we shift from proof of work to proof of stake. So the biggest concerns about wasted electricity essentially for running Ethereum are going to largely go away. It's not that it's free to operate, but now the comparisons, between what would it take for human beings to do this job? Like what is the energy usage of a group of human beings and their computers sitting in an office building somewhere versus the Ethereum network doing this? It's just going to be a very, very quick and easy comparison. I do like that you brought up the sustainability use cases. I always thought it was fascinating that people want to be able to do carbon offset tracking and use blockchains for it because they know that information can be written and not manipulated by someone after the fact. And so people want to use this technology that has been accused of being, planet destroying in the past to track carbon offsets. Well, the nice thing with Ethereum is that conversation about, destroying the planet will hopefully be done in a few months.
That's super awesome. So tell us, besides, I think we both agree that carbon offset tracking, carbon accounting are super interesting use cases or case studies. What are some of the other case studies or use cases or case studies, as you like to call them, Dan, are you excited by, and what sort of keeps you excited by some of the examples of using Ethereum in everyday lives?
Yes, yeah. So instead of just giving a list of use cases, I like the way you asked that question. There are some case studies that I personally find just fascinating. One of them is Acre Africa. So Acre Africa provides parametric insurance for smallholding farmers in Africa. Traditional insurance is loss-based, right? You pay a certain amount for your insurance premium. When you have a loss, you then try to convince the insurance company that you had that loss, and maybe they try to convince you didn't. I mean, that's not a very pleasant way of saying it, but the truth is there's an insurance adjuster process required when you're talking about loss. So a human being typically has to come out and make an assessment about how much loss there actually was. And this is an expensive and time-consuming process. It's so expensive and time-consuming that it just doesn't work for these small holding farms in Africa. It's just not, it's not profitable for companies to offer insurance to them or for them to be able to afford it. And so what Acre Africa has done is parametric insurance. The way parametric insurance works is you pay your insurance premiums and you get reimbursed if there is a clear trigger event that can be publicly independently verified, such as not having more than a certain amount of rainfall over a certain period, or the high temperatures have remained at a certain level over a certain period, or this particular governmental entity has declared a drought. And an example, if you were in Florida, it would be your orange grows, right? You might actually get insurance against a late freeze because you know that that's going to be devastating to your crops. Now, the nice thing about this is there's no independent, there's no analysis, there's no adjusting process required in order for this to work. The moment that thing occurs in the real world, it immediately triggers an automatic payment from the network. So your payments into the network are automatic. No human being has to handle them. They just go straight in from your wallet to to the smart contract. And then the payouts happen the same way. If this event occurs, you get paid. And what it's done is it's reduced the time and the cost to a point where it's now actually cost effective for both the provider and the farmers to afford this. So I think this is wonderful. It's a great example of not only reaching new communities that were unable to have such insurance or any insurance before, but it's also a great example to other companies today who might say, yeah, why do we need to do that? Well, just look at the cost savings and time savings we're talking about here. Why wouldn't you want it? It's kind of like, the internet showing up and you saying, yeah, I'd rather just mail the letter instead of send an email. Nowadays we just shake our heads, right? That makes no sense. Okay, so that's one. Another one that I just want to point out that I find interesting is that Microsoft Azure now uses a blockchain to track their supply chain for the components in their server farms, right? So if you have big server farms, there are lots of parts, right? It's not just the machines, it's all different boards, and it's the power cables and zip. There's just tons of pieces of equipment. And so they actually track that, but the way they track it is by creating an NFT for each one. Now, these NFTs are not public NFTs. They're not NFTs that go out into a marketplace like OpenSea. But the reason they use that structure is because it turns out it's fabulous for carrying metadata about an item. So what they have are effectively internal assets. So they're using the NFT standard for that on this supply chain product, and implementation. So I really like that because it's a creative use of NFTs.
Yeah, no, I think those are really fascinating case studies, Dan. I know you are a standards guy, Dan, so I didn't want to let you go without asking this question around Web3 and metaverse, right? Where frankly, there is no standard. There's not even a definition that's commonly acceptable. And I think the blockchain world, the Web3 world, and the metaverse are sort of convoluted right now. Where do you see Ethereum Enterprise Alliance sort of playing a role as this Web3 metaverse starts to gain momentum beyond just the hype?
Right. We've been talking about that a good bit more internally. We're definitely seeing some groups beginning to form to talk about the metaverse and where they might want to see standards. Blockchain technology is the foundation for all digital assets, essentially. And so when you're in the metaverse, payments are typically done using, well, it's not just payments. Everything that can be considered an asset is ultimately has its existence on a blockchain. So, digital assets are both a payment vehicle and an ownership vehicle. And we think that is going to continue just like it has been. It actually began with games, right? It began even before blockchain with people selling items on eBay, right, from games. And so now we've seen those marketplaces be fully on blockchains, which is really where they should be. And so in the metaverse, I think we're going to see every asset be connected in that way. We also are expecting to see increasing tie-in to physical products and services. We're already seeing it with NFTs in general, but of course, many people would like a way to connect what they do in the metaverse with something that they do in the real world, even if it's just getting paid for what they create within the metaverse. So we haven't yet, I don't think we've yet ourselves decided or settled on what kinds of standards might be appropriate there. But we are at the point where that needs to happen. There's enough interest in the metaverse. I would say, you ask about the hype cycle for enterprise deployment of blockchain. I think we've had early hype, and now the hype has dropped somewhat, and we're having a steady deployment. We're not there yet. We're nowhere near that with the metaverse yet. We're still, what we're getting is a lot of hype and a lot of new innovation, a lot of creativity, but we are a number of years away from seeing the same kind of real, institutional or enterprise adoption there. So I think we have some time. We have some time to look at it and get it right. The EEA formed and was able to help initially with its enterprise focused, I should say, enterprise chain focused standards. But I think ultimately our greatest value is going to be what we are providing now as the world is really ready to move towards full adoption of Ethereum-based solutions. So we have some time. I don't think we're in a super rush. And if we try to rush and do it too early, you can end up with a lot of bad standards and a lot of wasted time. What you've got is enthusiasm, but you don't have wisdom yet in the space.
Yeah. No, that's very nicely and eloquently put, Dan. And in fact, when this whole blockchain rush started, 5 or 6 years back, we came up with something called the blockchain bullshit buster, right? Which was essentially a list of 10 things that, if those 10 things are not met, then there's no use case for blockchain. Blockchain is not there for everything that you need. And I feel like we need a metaverse BS buster as well, because right now every AR VR conversation is being termed as metaverse altogether. But anyways, yeah, I think there was.
We're not at Ready Player One. We're not at Ready Player One. We're nowhere near it. Okay, so if you want to look at a popular example of where one person's view of where the world could go.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. So last question, Dan, if you had one wish that could come true, what would that be?
Yeah, so Ethereum has really never enjoyed as much mainstream visibility as it does today. I'm always still surprised when I mention Ethereum, and again, non-technical people tell me they've heard of it. They've even heard of it. That wasn't the case even 2 years ago, right? But again, the public discussion is pretty much focused on cryptocurrencies, consumer-facing DeFi, NFTs for art or collectibles, and other use cases that really deal with finance or speculation. There's just not as much visibility for the business use cases or commercial business use of DeFi. And so my wish really is for more of these business use cases. I want to be able to continue to demonstrate how Ethereum can solve real world business problems. We're doing it today. That report that we did is intended to be the first and not the last of those reports as we see more and more of those deployments. And ultimately, that's what we need. We need those deployments to come in. We need you to tell us about those case studies. So I know this is some material that we can provide to you, but a link if you're willing to make that available. But we have a place where people can submit use cases and case studies. Please do send them in, because this is what will make the difference. This is what will change it, from being in the internet world, being eyeballs, to to something real. Well, here it's what makes it real is the case studies.
Yeah, no, Dan, I think that's a collective wish that we also have. So I hope and I wish that your wish comes true. And thanks a lot for your wisdom, Dan. I think I really enjoyed the conversation, and I'm very sure that our audience will as well. Back to you, Mark.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Dan and Saurabh. That was a great discussion. To learn more about HFS, head over to hfsresearch.com, where you can view most of our research for free. Plus, we have a growing library of videocasts just like this one that you can take with you wherever you go. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next HFS videocast.